So I'm going to go to our last speaker. Notes, come on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. 1 second. Okay, here we go. Yes, Mr. Lionel Bradford. Last but not least, who leads the Greening of Detroit. And for those that don't really know about this organization, they're involved in the building of green spaces, planting trees, so on and so forth. And they also help to educate regarding the importance of that and actually help people find jobs that support the mission. These type efforts are really critical to our survival as a species, not only because the role that nature plays in our mental health. I mean, those who've had the opportunity to go out and spend time in green spaces will probably notice how it speaks to their mental health, but it helps our physiology as well. And when it comes to infrastructure, just realize that when water is not where it's supposed to be, plants kind of act like, and trees in particular, act like sponges. They kind of soak this stuff up, so maybe it doesn't overrun some of our infrastructure. So we did ask for Mr. Bradford to kind of talk about some green solutions and what he does and how he's going to save us all. So with that, Mr. Bradford.
Thank you, James. And I'll try and share my screen here. There we go.
I don't see it yet. Do I see it? Let me see. No, we don't see it yet. I know what's happening. It's waiting for Rochelle to smile. See, I told you. See what I tell you.
I was just about to cue up the presentation.
Let's see here. Rochelle, if you could, I would appreciate it. Thank you so much. And so thank you, James, for the introduction. I thought I'd start off at least talking a little bit about the organization itself, and then getting into, why we think that green space and trees in particular are good, viable options for mitigating stormwater. The Greening of Detroit, our mission is to inspire sustainable growth of a healthy urban community through trees and green spaces, education, job, and training opportunities. And so the organization itself has been around since 1989. If you want to go to the next slide. Thank you, Rochelle. A little history. We've been around since 1989. So we planted well over 130,000 trees since our inception. The organization itself was started, many of you may know Detroit was once known as the Paris of the Midwest, and that was because of its tree canopy cover. But between 1950 and 1980, the city lost over 500,000 trees for a number of reasons: urbanization, neglect, and disease, mostly. And so the organization was founded in 1989 to combat that issue. What we do, we work with Detroiters to improve the quality of life in neighborhoods. We develop green spaces, and we build relationships with community partners. We think it's very important that we don't want to impose our will on anyone, but we want to be accepted into neighborhoods. We want residents not only to have a say in what's going on with their neighborhoods, but be a part of the work that we do. And so we provide holistic green infrastructure and workforce development programming. We work in Detroit, Hamtramck, and Highland Park. Rochelle? all the work we do, we of course we would depend heavily on volunteers. We work with about anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 volunteers a year. And those are from organizations, from schools, local and state entities, you name it. We plant and street trees, schoolyards, parks, nurseries, just about anywhere that a tree can go. We do want to put the right tree in the right place, though. And the education component, James mentioned that earlier. I mean, that's a key to all of this. We want to educate residents and really, talk about the benefits of trees. I mean, I think that we all know a lot of the environmental benefits, but talk a lot about the social benefits of trees and the economic benefits of trees. Next slide, please, Rochelle. Trees, trees, trees. Why we plant trees? We want to keep Detroit River and our Great Lakes clean here in Detroit. I think that we can all agree that trees are important in the environment, especially in urban areas such as Detroit. We have a tree canopy cover here of 24%. And a healthy urban city our size should have a tree canopy cover of 40%. And so there's quite a ways that we have to go there in terms of coverage and canopy cover. All of this is said because we really want to talk about managing the precipitation and stormwater using trees and other green infrastructure. The next slide, please. How do trees mitigate stormwater? Well, there's three processes in that. One is interception. Interception is huge because that's when the leaves and branches are taking the rain. One tree can intercept 2,000 gallons of water a year. It reduces stormwater runoff, and it also reduces the velocity by which the raindrops hit the ground, which is important for erosion. So interception is a huge component of the whole way that trees help to mitigate stormwater. Evapotranspiration is big as well in the process. One tree can transpire 40,000 gallons of storm water a year. That's one tree. And so you can imagine what we can do if we plant, 1,000 trees or what have you. And then infiltration is the last part of that. As you all know, the roots can absorb storm water, but they also make the soil a perfect place for infiltration so that water can actually soak into the ground rather than running off. And so those are the three ways that trees, the three processes really that trees can mitigate storm water. The next slide, please. This is a very interesting slide here. And I have 2022 tree plantings at the top. That should be 2020. We planted as an organization 1,015 trees in 2020. And the average tree had a caliper of 2 inches. One tree can absorb 350 gallons a year of stormwater. And so with those 1,000 trees, as you can see, that equates to about 355,000 gallons of water. And so that's pretty important, as you can see here. I mean, I think that not only are trees, we got all the benefits from trees, but then there's also, this is one of the most economic ways that we can mitigate stormwater. And I think that's important to mention. We also do stormwater retention ponds. If you go to the next slide, please, Rochelle. Over at Chandler Park on the east side of the city, we installed a bio-retention pond there. This was the first of its kind in Michigan. I mean, this is huge. It can manage up to 2.5 million gallons of stormwater. So this is another green infrastructure type of treatment that you can use to mitigate stormwater. We planted 110 trees there, 259 shrubs, and over 4,000 plugs in and around the bioretention pond. And so, I mean, you know, you look at that and you look at the amount of stormwater that this thing could hold and then release over a period of time is pretty amazing. We also run a tree nursery out at the Old City's nursery, Myers Nursery in Rouge Park, and it's on the west side of the city. We installed a retention pond there as well. This retention pond actually has the capacity to hold 1 million gallons of stormwater. It can hold 2 back-to-back 100-year storms, and it's designed to catch 11 acres of runoff from the site. So another green infrastructure type treatment that could really be useful in terms of managing stormwater. And so one last thing I want to mention before I get off is that not only you know, the implementation of green infrastructure, not only is it helpful for mitigating stormwater, but we also have to look at the jobs that we can create from doing these types of installations, planting trees and installing bioretention ponds and rain gardens and all these other types of green infrastructure treatments. We have a adult training program called the Troy Conservation Corps. And these folks are trained in this type of work. And so, you know, they come through a 6-week training program. We've recruited over 2,000 people since we started the program. Over 800 people have graduated, and these are Detroiters who have barriers to employment. And so any way that, you know, I think that we can use green infrastructure and the installation of green infrastructure to mitigate stormwater, but now also to create jobs, I think is a plus. So with that said, that's the end of my rant, and I do want to thank you all for your time. I'm more than willing to take any questions.
Thank you so much for those words. And so we will go to questions, but let me just say, if I could summarize some thoughts. You know, we heard from our first presenter that our infrastructure is important, and because of a combined system can be a little bit of a challenge for us. We heard in the second presenter that that health concerns or flooding and its associated health concerns are a very prevalent problem. And in the third presentation, again, some strategies that seem to be very helpful. So I'm going to take the first question. I actually have questions for our first and third presenter. The first thing is to Dr. Miller. If you have some thoughts about our infrastructure or what needs to happen, are we beyond being able to fix this, or if we were to be making some requests, what might that be from a civil engineering standpoint?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I do think that action does need to be taken. We can't just assume that it's all doom and gloom. So, yeah, and as I tried to allude to during my short presentation, I think the types of actions run the gamut of scale from immediate action, things that you can do to protect yourself from the next storm, to preventing another storm to cause the type of flooding that we've seen already. And that's the type of solution that's going to take many years and going to have to be planned over many years. And for that solution, that is the more long-term solution, I believe that that what we need to do is look at more resilient and flexible structures. In other words, the type of structures that we put out today, or maybe 10 years ago, that before we started looking at resiliency so much, were structures that were designed for a particular event. And we tried to select that event to be so big that it would be an event that we don't expect to happen very often. So if we design for it, we should be safe. And the problem with that is that the system works relatively inefficiently for really low events. And then for higher events, it can handle it. But then once you go over that, you know, you're screwed and you're going to have flooding everywhere. And so the idea is to look at a system that has the capacity to be more resilient. And one of the ways that you can do that in Detroit, or one of the things that's being looked at, is to take advantage of regional solutions. That is, look at the system as a whole and evaluate spots that can be used for storage in the system that may cross political boundaries, may cross geographic boundaries and so on. But much of this is going to take regional consideration. I would also say that we can't just look at this as a water problem. As I tried to mention before, also, this is infrastructure as a sort of holistic look at infrastructure. Some of the problems we've seen have also been caused by problems with the electric grid. And so I do believe that there needs to be integrative solutions. And then roads. Many of the roads in the Detroit area are very low lying rather than being elevated highways. They're low lying freeways, and they rely on pumps to get the water away from that system. So I'd be happy to go into more details, but for right now, I'm going to just stop at that. I also might add that there are also some shorter term solutions that take less money that I think we need to not lose sight of. And those are things like maintenance, funding for just regular maintenance. Some people, I think in the video you were showing, talked about the fact that there weren't any catch basins in the neighborhood, and that was causing flooding in the neighborhood. But even if there are catch basins, if you don't maintain them and they get clogged up, the response will be the same as if you didn't have a catch basin. And one of the things that we've been seeing through driving around during these flooding events is that often the catch basins aren't functioning, and those are relatively cheap maintenance solutions.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And then I do have, and I'm sorry to be taking up everybody's time, but I have the mic, so I'm sorry. So my next question to Mr. Bradford is, how long does it take once a young tree is planted to kind of get those benefits? And I'm thinking that the reason for that question is, my suspicion is the best time to plant a tree is probably 10 years ago. The next best time is probably today. So that's one question. And then the next is, are there some plantings that are more beneficial than others? Like, you know, are evergreens better than other trees or shrubs or what have you? I mean, who are there plantings that do the most work?
Great question, Jameson. Thank you. For your first question, I think that it depends on the species of tree. And that would answer both questions. But in terms of how long does it take to get to reap benefits, I think once we plant a tree, anywhere from 1.5 inches to a 2-inch caliber tree, these are ball and burlap trees that we plant, they're going to start absorbing water instantly. I mean, they need water to grow. And so will they absorb as much as a mature tree will? No. And so you're looking at maybe a 10 to 15 year frame before a tree is considered mature that can provide the benefits that I spoke of earlier. In terms of what plantings are better, of course, evergreens and some of your willows and trees of that nature are better for absorbing stormwater. But you want to make sure that you know, first of all, you're planting species of trees that are climate change resistant or resilient. But then also you want to make sure that you know, trees with that develop deep roots and things of that nature, like oaks and birches, we want to get those in the ground as well. So it depends on the species. Some species they absorb or water a lot better than others, and you know, some don't do too well with water. So it depends.
Thank you. Thank you. So we can kind of, I will yield the floor now to those who might have other questions. I think Rochelle's going to help me with that, kind of navigate maybe some questions that have come up.
Yes, James, we have a question from Terry and then from Lisa. You can ask your question, then we'll answer the rest that's in the chat.
Thank you. So I'm Terry Campbell. I'm from Senator Debbie Stabenow's office, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that just this past Friday, the senator was here in Michigan announcing over $11 million in investment in water infrastructure projects throughout Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and St. Clair counties. The projects announced will increase water treatment efficiency and capacity in St. Clair County and in Macomb County, investment in one of the retention structures that's going to be done in Macomb County. There was investment in Great Lakes Water Authority interceptor, which I'm sure Professor Miller, you know, the big interceptor project. It's a multi-year project that Great Lakes Water Authority has for trying to better manage the combined sewer overflow in these big, you know, water events. So there was investment in that announced, and also some lead pipe mitigation dollars for Oakland County to get at lead in the water out there. And I just also wanted to say that I have a handout that I'll share with the Cures team, and they can, you know, when they send out notes or whatever, you guys can pass out this handout. But it summarizes the water infrastructure investment that's being made as a result of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the bipartisan bill that was approved a couple months ago. And that act includes the biggest investment in water, all sorts of water, $1 billion to the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which many of you will be familiar with, funding for water infrastructure improvements for communities to use in a variety of ways to get at, you know, pipes and other unflattering parts of how we manage water. And there was a substantial investment included in the state, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, almost $12 billion. And it looks like Michigan will get over a 10% increase in funding there. And the point of that is to improve sewage and stormwater treatment so that we keep it out of people's houses and we keep it out of our waterways and our lakes and that sort of stuff. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that this was a huge investment that's going to be made available for water infrastructure projects, unlike anything that I've ever seen in my lifetime, that's for sure. And we'll make sure we get the handout to everyone so that you could be familiar with the types of funding streams that are available. And I will note that, you know, the majority of this money does go to like municipalities and states and people that operate water infrastructure.
Thank you so much for letting us know about that. And let me also mention to our audience that, you know, when we write to our politicians, we don't have to just write about complaints. We can write and thank them for the good work that they are doing, of which, you know, this is kind of one of those occasions. So That's always appreciated too, right? To get a positive word. So
Yeah, thank you
so
for
much.
that. Thank you for saying that. I think that most people are familiar with Senator Stabenow's track record on water. She is a real champion that for all manner of water.
Awesome. Okay. We have another, I think you said Lisa Rodriguez.
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this information. My question is for Dr. Miller. Thank you for the presentation. I am interested in your uncovering about contaminated land and how stormwater actually, I think what you said, I just wanted for clarity, runs off of contaminated land. I've often thought about that because there's lots of particles, lots of metal in air. And I've often thought about how that creates a base over green spaces. So I'll let you answer the question. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you very much for the question. And it's a great question, and there's a lot to be said to answer it, but I'll limit myself here. So what I was getting at is exactly what you're talking about, the fact that during heavy storms or heavy rainfalls that aren't adequately conveyed away by the storm sewer system. Therefore, there's a lot of water on the ground. And what I was talking about is that water migrating through the ground and picking up contaminants as it's moving through the ground and potentially contaminating the groundwater. So the slide that I presented was talking primarily about subsurface flow. But you brought up the fact that which is also true, the water that is standing that's left from a flood and then has to make its way as surface runoff along the ground, that water will be carrying contaminants from the surface soils and will be picking up some of the sediments, as you said, and carrying those to downstream locations. You also might have been alluding to the fact that the contaminants that are in the soil, as the water moves through and moves those contaminants into the root zone, those can be taken up by urban gardens that aren't elevated, and those contaminants can be taken up by the root zone. So there's a variety of transport mechanisms that are associated with the question that you asked.
Can I also add to that too? Sometimes the contaminant that may be in the soil, well, let me back up. I just want us to recognize that as we all become smart consumers, because it's kind of how we utilize our resources, it actually determines some of the things that show up in our environment. It's not the only factor, but it is an important factor. And so I think collectively, we do need to pay attention again to those things over which we do have some control. So.
We also had another question that's in the chat. It says, what are some of the specific things that JEI has done to help the residents in Jeff Chalmers to recover from the flooding based upon the data that was provided to them? And that question was from Linda.
I guess that's a question for me, like Thompson. Jefferson East Incorporated is a community development organization. And the principal thing that they did in the immediate aftermath was to make sure each of these people that had a flooded basement, sewage overflow, got connected with 2 or 3 things. First and foremost, they got them through the FEMA application process so that those people could get help from FEMA. And a lot of the residents we talked to said that they had then gotten connected to FEMA. Secondly, there were City of Detroit applications and requests that could be made. And so they directed them and did sort of a warm handoff to the City of Detroit resources in that regard. The third thing is that I think they connected them with a series of charities that were helping out to get some resources to people who needed it. So I think those were the primary things that they did. They were acting as a channel to get people to the places where there were actual resources that could help people through the crisis. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Like. We also have a question from Stuart Jacobson. You can ask your question.
Hi, thanks everyone for the update from Dr. Larson's presentation last year. I am a Wayne State graduate student in urban planning. I returned from Western Ukraine this past summer, working with a ministry that was helping build small affordable homes there. And I had to return back for school to be present in class. Anyway, so I took some of my class learning and assignments to Jefferson Chalmers in urban environmental planning class. So I've been involved in Jefferson Chalmers, and we started just a local initiative to build rain gardens for about 8 residential homes to prevent household flooding. Picking up on this, need to stop flooding. And I have friends in FEMA and things of that nature. And I understood that many of the people living around that area got hit really, really hard. And you confirmed that, Dr. Thompson. So I am out there trying to do that. Also, I'm a home builder. So we are, through a church there, trying to establish a home repair program to train people, kind of like the Greening of Detroit has done with planting trees and that sort of thing. So we're going in that direction because we're taking a cue from Dr. Larson's presentation to kind of seal off the gaps, cracks, and that sort of thing, and then even install a plumbing valve to block the sewage backup when it occurs. So we are preparing for that, and capacity we should be able to launch by June, but all of our projects should be underway. We build our first rain garden April 9th. And so I'm quite excited about that. But I was wondering, because you have all the research and that sort of thing, I'm trying to become a doctorate student at some point. But I thought, as an operational person on the ground, working with people as a minister, I think my focus and my ministry is specifically in Jefferson Chalmers. And if I can help in any way, present this information to rally the neighborhood so that they can take immediate action, like Dr. Miller said so. We would like to do that, but they're kind of, I don't want to just assume that I know what I'm doing. I don't. I am doing research and everything I can, but to be in contact and be here is wonderful. So if there's anything we could do together to collaborate, that would be probably better than to kind of independently do it on our own. Thank you.
We certainly appreciate, your support and your interest. We do have, we have a community advisory board. That might be something to try and get involved in or to monitor in some way. It's kind of a direct way to have some input as to, kind of what's going on, or connecting specifically with any of our participating organizations. I think, those are ways to stay connected. So good. I think, do we have any additional questions?
A couple, and I think Sandra answered one. I was going to ask her if she wanted to talk a little bit more about the inceptor pipe that she was talking about in the chat. Sandra, one of our CAP co-chairs, Sandra Turner-Handy. Give her opportunity.
The Inceptor pipe that is going to service Macomb County. I think the city of Detroit is leasing it to them for $1. It does nothing to help with the flooding or anything here on the east side of Detroit. As you saw earlier, I was heavily impacted by the flooding. So, but of more concern, and I heard the gentleman talking about the valves, the backup valves and all of that. As you know, the city is instituting a program around it that is not equitable to those communities that are least able to financially afford to correct the problems that is resulting in basement flooding in their communities. So it's just about really looking at our infrastructure and planning for redevelopment in the city and looking at correcting these problems as we build housing, especially on the east side of Detroit. As we build housing, it is important that we begin to put in place infrastructure within those new buildings that can combat this problem of flooding here on the east side of Detroit.
Thank you, Sandra, for that. We had another question, Dr. Blessman. It was from Aaron Stanley. It says, especially knowing that this funding is coming, what is the role researchers can play to ensure that it's distributed equitably and towards projects that will be most effective and resilient to changing climate patterns? I think this is very important. We also had another question or comment from someone from the community talking about the grant that Governor Whitmore announced, I believe, last week or so, about 6 communities that was awarded this grant to ensure safe, clean drinking water. And the community concern that was emailed to us is that out of those 6 communities, none of them included Detroit. So to go back to what Aaron was saying, how can we make sure that these funds are distributed in an equitable way? So whoever wants to answer that.
Well, I do think, as I mentioned before, the importance of educating yourself and being aware of what is happening, and to make sure that you, if there are some concerns, that these things are raised with your political leadership. As well as even to us in cures, if there are things that that we need to be doing or kind of monitoring in some way to make sure that there is equity, we can do those things. I will say, and I just have to mention that whenever you see me, you'll see me in this hat right here, right? And so what you'll notice is on the front of my hat, it says the D gets an A. That's really because I have a tool that I call a citizen report card, because I really try to look at ways to empower citizens to not only help themselves and their family, but also the community as well. So when I talk about, training and educating yourselves, when you spend so much time, per month educating yourself, you get an A on the report card. When you are writing letters to your legislator, you get an A on your report card. When you are recycling so that things are kind of better managed and don't necessarily overcrowd our landfills, you get an A on your report card. You also got to pick up garbage too that you didn't throw down in order to get an A. But in any event, so that's real. I don't wear this hat to be cool. I wear this hat because it helps me stay focused on what I think is important, which is an issue of social fitness, reminding me of how we are all connected and how we all have a responsibility to each other. So I don't know how, the D is going to get an A everywhere and I can retire my hat, but I figure if I keep talking about it, somebody's going to connect with me and we're going to figure out a way that we all know how to make it happen and get it done. So. All right.
With
Any
regard
to that?
This is like, if I could comment on one of these questions. The question regarding the potential for using cutoff valves in sewer lines coming into houses is a really good question in terms of how do we equitably handle interventions to protect the most vulnerable. Because if I have a block of upper middle class people and they all install these valves, that means that they're going to be protected from sewer backups coming into their basement. But all the sewage water that would have come to them will go to somebody else who doesn't have those valves. So we have to be really cognizant of the policy externalities that are produced by each of the interventions that we talk about in this area. This is why what Carol's telling you is so important, where she's talking about the highly interconnected and involved nature of this. We need to be very systematically thinking through and making sure that the interventions that we make available are done in a systematic way that protects the most vulnerable, all those wonderful people down in Jefferson, Chalmers, for example, who are struggling to make it through the second, third, fourth flood that they've been through. How do we protect them systematically as opposed to create additional problems? And I don't know how that is being done, but I think it is crucial that it should be done. So I am on the agenda that where people are talking about that. And I think that's in essence part of what Sandra's concerned with as well. Thank you.
And let me mention too, while it's on my mind, the question about equity. You know, we do have our equity watchdogs, like even Sandra is a part of, you know, Green Door Initiative now, that's very interested in equity. And in fact, I kind of had to, because we limited, I had to limit the video, but Donnell Wilkins, who's at the Green Door Initiative, even in that, if you go and watch that whole news piece, she makes the point of, you know, making sure that things are equitably distributed and that, you know, all neighborhoods have access to some of these resources. So I suspect that she will be one who will be actively looking at this and will let us know if it looks like as though it's inappropriate. And I think we're kind of at 12:53. We're getting close to the end of our time. And, you know, if there are other questions, you know, these tend to get posted on our website. You can ask questions there. We will do our best to try and answer them and provide those answers if we don't have them right away. So we're here for you and we will not disappear.
Thank you, Dr. Blessman. We
Sure.
appreciate you navigating us through this. And this was a very needed conversation. More conversations have to happen. We have to have the hard conversations and face these things until there's equity for everyone. Talking about things like environmental justice and environmental racism, we need to hear these things. We have our advocacy lawyer on here as well, Nick Schreck, who was one of our co-leaders, along with Chris Trinacosta. And just want to say thank you to everyone, to our presenters today, Dr. Like Thompson, to Dr. Carol Miller, and to Lionel Bradford. Thank you for this information. This will be posted on the Cures website. We'll post this, our link to our website in the chat momentarily. But we also want to have a little fun for those who have come out here today. I'm going to ask, let's see, I'm going to ask Light, since he's already unmuted, in a second, to think of a number between 1 and 50. He doesn't have to give it to us yet. And we want you as participants, we're going to raffle off a $10 CVS gift card. If you would put your number, whatever number that you choose, you can start putting that in the chat. We also want to let you know that these events, these environmental health chats, we're able to do this because of your feedback. So we put a link to our very brief survey. We ask that you would please fill that out. We really appreciate it. Again, it's very brief. So please fill that out. I see people are already putting their numbers in the chat. We're going to check Facebook really quickly.
What's the
And,
range?
So 1 to 50.
1 to 50? Okay.
Numbers are going in. Give another second. Also, thank you to all of our CAB members that's on here. You heard from Sandra Turner-Handy, who was one of our CAB co-leaders, as well as Melissa Sargent, who's on here. And we are grateful for all of you. All right, like, you want to give us the number? It looks like.
Do people get to jump in if it's not here? The number I always give for things like this, and you gave me the range that allowed it perfectly, is 42, which in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is the answer to all things.
All right, 42.
Wow.
Okay, we're gonna see. Let me go back through this chat here and see what I can see. Whoever has 42 or the closest to 42, I see a couple. I see a 43 so far. We will, and that's Yvonne.
I want to change my number to 42.
You want to change your number?
No way.
And so it looks like Yvonne Willis is our winner. Yvonne, if you could send me your information or just inbox me or direct chat me rather, we would appreciate it. And so I made sure I checked Facebook as well. So it looks like Yvonne is our winner. All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, our website will be in the chat. And we appreciate you, and we hope that you will catch this next time. We've recorded this video and is also on our Facebook page. Thank you so very much. Dr. Blessman, do you have any last words?
No, I want to thank you, Rochelle, for putting all this together and kind of getting us here today. Really appreciate, there's a lot of work that you put into this behind the scenes. I really thank you. I do also want to thank our presenters for taking the time. And I want to thank everyone who took time out of their day to come and listen to us for a little bit. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you. Stay connected, stay involved, stay safe.
Bye, everyone.
So long.